Britain's new Foreign Secretary has won some plaudits for sounding tougher on Israel than his predecessor. He said this to the BBC on the weekend.
Yesterday, when I met with the Israeli president, with the prime minister, with others, I stressed over and over again that they must abide by international humanitarian law, that the number of casualties are too high, and that they have to have that, top of their mind. We are going to have a continuous dialogue with them and keep making these points about humanitarian law, about civilian casualties, not just about what's happening in Gaza, but also what is happening on the West Bank, where I made very clear yesterday that the settler violence, people actually, targeting and on occasions killing Palestinian civilians is completely unacceptable. And those people responsible for that, it's not good enough just to arrest them. They need to be arrested, prosecuted, and imprisoned. These are crimes.
Those are fine words. David Cameron is, of course, right to call for international law to be upheld. Shining a light on settler violence is also pretty important. But I'm not getting too excited. Why? Because Western politicians always say these liberal things about Israel. What they never do is anything about it. Now, the most obvious case in point here concerns settlement expansions, which are, of course, the root of settler violence. Now, on this issue, every UK government has agreed Israel should stop expanding settlements. In 2008, Gordon Brown said Israel should stop expanding settlements. He did nothing to pressure Israel to actually stop doing it. Back when he was Prime Minister, David Cameron described settlement expansion in East Jerusalem as genuinely shocking. But that same David Cameron also opposed the kind of action, namely boycotts, that could stop Israel getting away with it. Then, earlier this year, Rishi Sunak briefed journalists he would press Netanyahu about settlement expansion. Yes, the same Rishi Sunak who wants to actually ban boycotting Israel, right? And what do you think is the result of UK politicians condemning Israeli settlement expansions while protecting Israel from any consequences for expanding settlements? Well, you guessed it, they kept expanding. This graphic from Al Jazeera shows how settlements have consistently grown since 1972. In 2018, there were 683,000 settlers on Palestinian land. The map on the right shows the effect this has on life in the West Bank. The green parts on the map are areas managed by the Palestinian Authority, of course, still under Israeli occupation, but managed by the Palestinian Authority. They are separated by the blue parts of this map, all under direct Israeli military control, and dotted strategically throughout the blue zones are the settlements. So they're shown in these red dots of varying size. Now, they make a proper Palestinian state in the West Bank practically impossible. And Western politicians know this. They admit this. Watch this speech President Obama gave in Jerusalem in 2013.
Put yourself in their shoes. Look at the world through their eyes. It is not fair that a Palestinian child cannot grow up in a state of their own. Living their entire lives with the presence of a foreign army that controls the movements, not just of those young people, but their parents, their grandparents, every single day. It's not just when settler violence against Palestinians goes unpunished. It's not right to prevent Palestinians from farming their lands or restricting a student's ability to move around the West Bank or displace Palestinian families from their homes. Neither occupation nor expulsion is the answer. Just as Israelis built a state in their homeland, Palestinians have a right to be a free people in their own land.
So as you can see, in his sort of usual very eloquent manner, Obama talked a good talk on Israel-Palestine. But Netanyahu consistently ignored him. He wasn't persuaded by those fine, inspirational words that Barack Obama gave. And how did Obama respond? Well, you guessed it. with a multi-million-dollar aid package. Yes, in the final year of his presidency, Obama signed a new decade-long aid deal to Israel worth $38 billion. Now, this is why I'm not really interested in what any politician says about Israel-Palestine. I'm interested in what they do. If you talk a good talk on settlements, I do not care unless you explain how you are going to make sure Israel has consequences for settlement expansion, has consequences for settler violence, has consequences for breaking the rules of war, sorry. Because what we have at the moment is a situation where all Western politicians agree. I don't think there's a single Western politician. I mean, Trump was maybe a bit of an exception here, but other than Trump, you don't get many Western politicians who stand up and say, I'm in favor of settlement expansion. They all stand up and say, we are opposed to settlement expansion. Oh, but also we are opposed to any of the measures that could discipline Israel to the extent that they don't do it. And this is up to the present day. So Joe Biden has always been very, very clear. He supports a two-state solution. He supports a viable Palestinian state, even while he supports pretty much unconditionally Israeli war crimes in Gaza. And guess what? Israel are still expanding those settlements, even amid the Gaza war. They are putting more money towards settlement expansion. This is from the EU's chief diplomat. I'm appalled to learn that in the middle of a war, the Israeli government is poised to commit new funds to build more illegal settlements. This is not self-defense and will not make Israel safer. The settlements are a grave international human rights law breach. They are Israel's greatest security liability. Now, they would be Israel's greatest security liability if Joseph Borrell or Joe Biden or Rishi Sunak or even Keir Starmer suggested that by expanding those settlements, we would reduce the support militarily, diplomatically, financially that we give to Israel. Unfortunately, we don't do that. We send nice tweets, we give nice speeches, and then we say, oh, they ignored us and still we're going to give Israel everything they want, right? Which means that we are complicit in those settlement expansions. There's no point in saying, well, I condemn settlement expansions. If you are giving Israel unconditional financial, military, and diplomatic support, I don't give a damn what you say about settlements.
What it is, pure and simple, is virtue signaling. It's taking positions because you know that it's going to resonate with a liberal or even progressive audience without feeling the need or really coming under the pressure to back those nice words up with anything concrete or meaningful. And for me, the explanation of why this is the case is the important bit. Why is it that you have a succession of British prime ministers and American presidents who are happy to condemn illegal settlement expansion, but don't want to do anything about it? Now, there's one way of looking at it, which you sometimes hear, which is the idea that, the Israeli lobby is too strong for politicians in the West to do anything about it. And actually, I don't think that's what's going on. I think the reason why you don't have those condemnations of illegal settlements being backed up with any real diplomatic or financial pressure, any sort of reduction in arms sales, is because Israel has always been perceived by the West as an extension of our geopolitical interests in the region. Now, this was something that was explained, I think, wonderfully, concisely, and thoroughly by Rashid Khalidi in my recent interview with him, which is one of the reasons why Britain committed itself to the formation of a state of Israel with the Balfour Declaration. One was out of a sense of what you might call anti-Semitic Zionism, the sense of going, well, we don't want these people here, let's put them over there. But the other was the idea that if you created what was understood by many British politicians to be the equivalent of a little Jewish Ulster, that would protect the land route between Egypt and into the Middle East. And that would protect British trade and military interests. And even today, when you think about which countries are lining up behind Israel, so not just Britain and, of course, the US, but India as well, well, that's all seen vis-a-vis regional I guess, power brokering, wanting to disempower, in particular, Iran. So Israel is considered an extension of US geopolitical interests. It's considered an extension of British geopolitical interests. And so that's why these nice and flowery words aren't backed up by anything. It's not merely hypocrisy, it's something else entirely.
It's not in the West's interests to really police what Israel does, right? They basically care that they've got this ally in the Middle East. If Arab socialism, for example, I mean, it hasn't been a threat for a while, but in the 60s and the 50s, the idea of Arab nationalism and Arab socialism was a real threat to the British and the Americans. Therefore, having the Israelis there was helpful, especially in the Cold War, in fact. Now, it is a solid ally in the region. So while I think the Americans maybe would prefer Israel to not be expanding the settlements, it doesn't damage their strategic interest if they do. So they're sort of happy to say, oh, well, vocally, we'd prefer you don't do it, but we're going to let you do it, while giving Israel the ultimate backstop, because Israel, as you say, sort of is an outpost of the West. I'm going to do something cheeky and promote a side project of mine. I did a recent episode with David Waring, why Britain backs Israel. You can look that up, Crash Course with Michael Walker. It's getting great reviews, that particular episode, on all good apps.